Dust motes hang in the beam of a barn window, and 5 silhouettes sit like sleeping giants. The clock on each of them is almost out of time. Metal oxidizing, rubber hardening, titles misplaced. But tonight, 5 legends of the 1960s get a second breath. These aren't rumors. These are the real cars that went missing and somehow came back. 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. The rumor started with a door that hadn't opened in 40 years. When the lock finally gave, the first thing that stepped into the light was the pedestal wing, 23.5 inches of aluminum that once turned NASCAR from brawn to aerodynamics. Under the dust sat a one-owner Charger Daytona, mothballed after the wild years. The fenders still wore their nose cone bolted seams, and the uprights cut the air like a cathedral arch. It was the kind of sight people swear they saw once at a gas station and never forgot. Why does this matter? Because the street Daytona was built purely so the race car could exist. Just 503 were made for 1969, most with the 440 Magnum at 375 horsepower, and around 70 with the 426 Hemi at 425 horsepower. The barn-found car wore all the tells: flush rear window plug, brake cooling scoops, and that tall wing that cleans the air behind the fastback. People called it outrageous. In truth, it was math on wheels. The Mopar answer to Ford's Torino Talladega and Mercury's Cyclone Spoiler 2. What saved it was restraint. Instead of restoring the scars away, the rescuer cataloged chalk marks, date-coded hoses, even the wings weathering. The car emerged not as a repaint, but as a time capsule. Proof that someone in 1969 could walk into a Dodge dealer and buy a wind tunnel experiment with a warranty. In a world that loves clones, the barn door had protected the rarest thing of all. 2. 1963 Pontiac Tempest Super Duty. It didn't look like a street fighter. It looked like the car your science teacher drove until you peeked under the lightweight aluminum. This Tempest Super Duty wasn't just a barn find. It was an escapee from the darkest corner of Detroit's skunk works. Pontiac built roughly a dozen in 1963. About 6 Le Mans coupes and 6 wagons, just long enough to devastate NHRA and then disappear when GM pulled the plug on factory racing. The soul of it was a 421 Super Duty V8, dual quads, sky-high compression, surrounded by weight-shaving tricks from nose to tail. The one that resurfaced years later did it the new school way, popping up online as a stripped roller from storage. The original engine and gearbox were gone, but the magnesium bones and lightweight front clip told the story. Even as a carcass, it roared. You could read its mission in the details: thin glass, race hardware, and a chassis meant for 60-foot launches, not grocery runs. The Tempest's quirky transaxle layout and featherweight mass gave it a slingshot start. The big SD heart would have made sure the shot landed. 3. 1967 Shelby GT 500. The barn door slid open and half the county showed up. Under a blanket of dust sat an Acapulco Blue 67 GT 500, the first-year big block Shelby, roughly 2048 built, each one a fuse with a tale of legend. You could trace the years in the way the tires had sunk into the dirt floor, in the smell of old gasoline turned to varnish. A local had parked it and let life keep happening. And then someone said, "It's time." Specs tell only half the story. The 67 GT 500 carried the 428 Police Interceptor, 355 horsepower on paper, and a tidal wave of torque in your spine. Twin snorkel air cleaner, functional scoops, roll bar with inertia, reel belts. The car made you feel like Carroll himself had signed a permission slip for trouble. Against crosstown rivals, 396 Camaros and 440 Mopars, the rescue didn't sandblast the soul away. The team freed stuck lifters, replaced perishables, and kept the paint's micro-scratches. Years you can see, not flaws to be erased. When the big block caught, the barn echoed like a church. Somewhere, a kid who once stared at a Shelby poster finally got to hear the sound the poster couldn't make. 4th, 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner A12. Some cars are royalty, this one is a street soldier. Mid-year 1969, Plymouth dropped the A12 package like a brick through a shop window. 446 barrel rated 390 horsepower, fiberglass lift-off hood pinned at the corners, black steel wheels with no hubcaps, and a Dana 60 with 4.1 zeros. The 5th digit of the VIN wore an M like a tattoo. About 1,432 A12 Roadrunners were built, and most were used exactly as intended hard. The one dragged from storage had all the fingerprints, organo-sol black hood scuffed by hands, 3 Holly 2 barrels stacked under a bathtub lid air cleaner, the smell of fuel that evaporates into legend. You could feel the urgency of its design. It existed to close the gap between a 383 Street car and a Hemi price tag. On a good day, it could nip at a stock Hemi's heels in the quarter, torque arriving like a freight train at 3,200 RPM. Park it beside a Judge or a Z28, and it still looks like a factory racer that wandered onto Main Street. What makes this rescue special is what didn't happen. No vinyl top swap to chase color charts. No correct chrome where bare steel belonged. The car got brakes, belts, and a carb rebuild. Then it was turned loose to do the one thing it never got to do in a barn: breathe. 5 1969 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2 Dan Gurney Special. Basements don't have wind, which is a shame because the Cyclone Spoiler 2 needs air to tell its story. Somebody had tucked one away. Blue and white Dan Gurney Special, long nose cone, reshaped fenders, and a bumper repurposed into an Aeroblade. Built for NASCAR's homologation math, Spoiler 2s were only a few hundred strong, roughly 500 total, with about 215 to 218 in Dan Gurney colors and 285 in Cale Yarborough, red and white. Many were optioned with the 3514V Windsor. The point wasn't brute displacement so much as clean air. Pulling one from a basement is a paradox. You're lifting a shape designed for 190 miles per hour air back into sunlight. The car's stance looks odd until you see it at speed, when the long nose washes the turbulence away and the tail stops dancing. Against Mopar's winged showstoppers, the Spoiler 2 has less theater and more subtlety, like a sprinter who doesn't bother with a victory lap. That quiet confidence is why they slipped through the cracks for decades. And it's why a basement rescue feels like finding a lost chapter to a book you loved as a kid. The restoration on this one honored the intent. The car kept its paint scheme, its period wind cheater geometry, and the heartbeat that made fans pick the blue-white pit banner on Sundays. It didn't become a clone of something louder, it became itself again.